So my name is Fiona Devine. I'm a Professor of Sociology and Dean and Head of Alliance Manchester Business School, which is a school which is part of the University of Manchester based in the northwest of the UK. It's the largest campus-based business school in the United Kingdom, and we teach over 5,000 students, and we're a full-service business school, so we teach the 18-year-old that comes in to do an undergraduate degree right through to somebody who will be doing continuing professional development as part of our education portfolio. So I wanted us all to reflect on what happened at the time of the Great Financial Crisis, because the causes and the consequences of that crisis are still being felt today and probably will be for quite some time, and really think about its implications for the business school world, particularly for leadership and management education, and how we have to produce the leaders of tomorrow that do take issues of corporate governance very seriously. There are still many examples in the business world and in all aspects of life where we have to think about issues of fraud, accountability, as I say, corporate governance, and how we address those issues and stand up to them is very important. So quite simply, I think business schools should be producing well-rounded people. And by that I mean that they are people that do understand business in a wider context, so understand the economic, social and political context in which businesses and organisations are operating, so understanding that external environment. I think it's also very important for people to understand the own environment they're working in, the organisations they're in, and how that works. And I think the business leaders of the future and people in organisations have to understand how to manage change, how to lead change, and how to deal with risk and uncertainty. Well, we'll only know that when there isn't another one, and I don't suppose that we will never have crises in the future. But perhaps there are people who have the independence of mind to step up and say where they are concerned about issues. It doesn't have to be a big crisis for people to draw attention to something, but it's having the independence of mind and sometimes the courage and bravery to stand up and question something and say something different, and not be part of groupthink or just say what everybody else is saying about a particular issue, but really thinking hard and reflecting on something, and challenging things as they come along if they don't feel right. I would hope so, as a business school dean, and they will be being taught what's needed if the curriculum is being kept up to date. An old curriculum doesn't serve anybody, so we want an academic community, our academic scholars, to be staying abreast of latest developments in the world of business and organisation and how they're changing, and always bringing theory and practice together. Our strapline in the business school at Manchester is original thinking applied, and it is really combining theory and practice. It's no good just having theory. Theory is often speculative, it isn't grounded. What you need to then do is think about the practice and the relationship between the two things, and that's very important. And I know that many business school deans aspire to achieve that. I think it's hugely important. We all talk about it, and we know that in a world of change, and as I was saying earlier, of risk and uncertainty, it's very important to have the space sometimes to step out of your organisation or a particular situation, be finding a platform or another arena where you're talking to people about issues and challenges that you're confronting and getting advice, and talking to people in similar sort of situation as yourself. And executive education and continuing professional development do provide that space for you to do that. It's very easy when you're in an organisation to think you're the only person that's confronting these problems and you're the person that's got to come up with novel solutions. often when you join an executive education program, you find yourself talking to people who are confronting very similar sorts of dilemmas and challenges, and it's good to be talking to those people and getting advice and having that collective discussion about what is a good way forward. Sustainable leadership is really thinking about issues to do with resources and how you use them well and how you use them efficiently and effectively and how you have them there for the long term. When we think about sustainability, one of our major preoccupations, of course, is with environmental sustainability at the moment. It could be other forms of sustainability. And Alliance Manchester Business School, but like a lot of other business schools, we do have scholars working in that sort of area. So, for example, there's lots of discussion at the moment about the need to move to a low carbon futures. But how do organisations get there? It's a huge transition, especially, for example, if you're a dominant player in a particular market and can see the future, so to speak. But how do you get there? And I think many academics are looking at those sorts of issues, and it's a core part of the curriculum, whether it's the MBA or electives on specialist masters or undergraduate programmes. And indeed, young people coming through all different types of programmes are very interested in those sorts of topics. There's high demand for them. Teaching has changed considerably over the last 10 to 20 years, most notably because of new technology. The days when you would go into a lecture and you would have a traditional lecture of 1 hour where someone would talk at you for that time, where you sat as quite a passive member of an audience, I think has long gone. And IT has allowed us to do amazing things in the classroom. And that kind of learning now engages the students a lot more. So it isn't so much about passive learning, and we can do that in quite big classroom situations. Now, even in the large lecture, you can present lots of interesting material in very innovative ways and be using apps and gaming apps and so on to help people learn and to really think in that sort of much more active rather than passive way. So I think that's been a very exciting period over the last 20 years for what we can do these days. Yes, like any other organisation, a business school has to be thinking about how it's changing and evolving all the time and is relevant, and I argue also in my talk how business schools are useful to the business world, and when I say useful, it's also important that they serve local communities as well as kind of base their reputation and brand in terms of their international profile. But saying that, one of the big challenges I think for the business school world is the politics of the day. Is the world going to stay as international as it has been for the last 20 years, whereby we embrace people of all nationalities moving around the world and studying at business schools? Will people feel comfortable with doing that in the future as the politics of the world changes? So when I was answering that question there, I was thinking about how important international mobility is for education in general, not just the business school world, but certainly the business school world has enjoyed a huge surge of interest from students coming to business schools from all around the world. And it would be a shame if we lost that confidence for people to travel and so on. Again, I think, as I've mentioned, we've got to be thinking about keeping students up to date with current debates about politics and so on, looking at international relations and what sort of implications that's going to have for trade, how countries collaborate with each other, and all those sorts of issues. These are all very important for understanding businesses and what happens in the business world. There's lots of things out there, of course, and even as a dean of a business school, you hardly know the breadth of all the activity in your own school. One thing I've been interested in, been watching my colleagues, is being involved in knowledge transfer partnerships where they work very closely with individual companies, and whether it's by coincidence or otherwise, I do have another number of colleagues who are working with legal companies at the moment around legal tech, and looking at all the changes that are happening with legal technologies, how that's disrupting the legal world, but also how data is disrupting the legal world as fintech has been disrupting that world as well. And it's giving advice to companies and really working closely with them about business problems that they have, and academics bringing their expertise to a particular company and helping them through a particular problem. And again, I would very much want to emphasise that it's important to be useful. There's nothing wrong with being useful. Yeah. I think I've given you an example there of how a business school, its colleagues can work very closely with a particular company. I think there are many other ways in which we can do it. One other way which I think is important is business schools do act as a platform for bringing people together to discuss major issues of the day. So, for example, Alliance Manchester Business School recently, one of our vital topics, a lecture series we have for the external business community, was looking at the industrial strategy that's being developed in the UK. And bringing people together to discuss those sorts of issues. And what was gratifying about that event was not so much that people were sharing business cards with me, but they were sharing business cards with each other. So we can often be a place where big ideas are discussed, the wider context can be considered, and it's bringing people together and thinking about solutions to issues as well.